One. Ooh, feeling relaxed. Welcome back, guys. Welcome to Road Less Traveled, a podcast by Apple with Distillery, where we interview people from across industries who are pushing the boundaries in their given field. Today, we've got an incredible guest. He has worked in New York for 8 years. Then he's now based in Australia. He's the head of innovation at CAPI. He's worked for, well, my God, some of my, I suppose what I would call my up-and-coming beverages, Absolute, Kahlua, and Malibu. Is that true, Thurman?
Yes. So I used to do, before I moved to Australia, I had my own consulting company that I specialized in innovation and did a lot of work for Absolute, Kahlua, and Malibu, yeah.
And now you also own your own rum brand, Ron Cologne, as well, and you're now the product director for Measured Guide.
Yes. A few things.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of titles. You got a lot of titles there, man.
I did forget one. I do have a little yoga thing that I do as well.
Really?
Called Same Place. It's like a yoga pop-up thing that I do with a friend. Based in Melbourne. Basically, just like trying to get a cool community together to do some yoga.
Yeah, is that
outside of the studio?
Everyone? Yeah,
open to anybody.
Outside?
Yeah. So basically, the idea is just that like my friend and I really wanted to do longer classes, and there's no one that did it. So we were like, hey, let's start a yoga pop-up on top of all the other stuff.
On top of all the other stuff that you do. But like I've known you for a while now, man, and like I feel like you bring a lot of do we call yoga Eastern philosophy? I feel like I'm so out of the loop when I'm like talking about yoga. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it's Eastern philosophy. It's one of those funny things where like I always joke around about it, but like yoga's from India. It's based in the Hindu religion. But today we just kind of like put it all together. We're like, ooh, a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of, we're like, oh, it's East. Everything.
Yeah.
So I guess like Eastern. Yeah.
But you bring like a lot of that philosophy to a lot of the innovation work that you do. Like I get that sense, like when you talk about, how you go about at least your thinking processes within not just your work, but like in your daily life, you bring a lot of that kind of philosophy with you. Do you sense that? Do you feel that way?
I've never thought about it like that, but as you were saying, I think the difference that you find between if you just use, I feel like it's two white guys talking about Western versus Eastern as a, let me just asterisk that.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I think the thing is, at least from my understanding, Eastern philosophy looks at a holistic approach to something, where Western philosophy is very like, there's a problem, let's fix it. And I think the way that I like to look at innovation or developing new products is like, it's not just about trying to fix a problem. It's not just about trying to create a product to like fill a gap. It's like, there's so much more to it. And so looking at the end consumer, looking at how are you going to use it? What's the point of even doing it? What does it look like? You really need to look at things in a broad perspective. So I guess to some degree, I probably do incorporate a lot of that like philosophy into what I do, but in a bit, I guess, unknowing kind of way.
Okay. What do you mean in an unknowing kind of way?
Well, I guess it's just like, I think it's like funny. So like sometimes, for example, like someone will be like, I need a brief for the design. And I sit there and I go, fuck, I don't know really how to explain this. So sometimes I'll send like a playlist and I'll go, it looks like this sounds.
Yeah.
Or like, I'll describe something. I'll be like, let me describe the venue that this thing goes at. Because sometimes I just feel like you can't just go like, oh, like we're trying to target this audience, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It needs to be 250 ml. It needs to be 3 colors. It needs to be that. That's like we need to innovate to create a solution. Where sometimes I'm just like, oh, like the vibe is this, or it needs to be more than just like connecting the dots, I suppose.
Do you use a lot of like, do you use a lot of synesthesia in your work? Like you mentioned playlists before, and like, do you use a lot of that kind of like cross-pollination in terms of artistic ideas, or is that just something that kind of comes naturally?
I think it's that comes naturally. I think also one of the great things is that I'm not like properly trained in what I do. Like, I went to university for political science and art history. I started working at a restaurant as a food runner because I needed money, and then fell in love with it. And then, I've kind of like sort of just fumbled my way through to where I am. So I don't necessarily have the scientific approach on how to really do it the correct way. What is the correct way? I don't know. I always do look to outside of categories. And, I think if you just look at the trends, or if you look at what you're doing and you only surround yourself like in drinks, if you're only going to cocktail bars, you're only going to develop things that cocktail bars use. Where for me, it's like, go to a restaurant, go to an art gallery, go to freaking a fashion store. There's so much inspiration out there. And most of the time, it's like the inspiration that's out there outside of the category that you work in is a little bit further along, which is great sometimes, but then also sometimes is terrible because you're like, what is this guy talking about? Like,
it's pretty weird. And especially like going outside of categories are a really strange thing, because I think it's pretty confronting in a way, because it forces you to go outside of yourself and your creative process to a certain degree to then understand how to bring it back to yourself as well, which I think is really interesting and intriguing. Did you do a lot of that for Measured Guide as well with the work that you guys have been doing? Because it strikes me as like this brainchild of three wonderful people, but knowing you for a little bit of time, it also strikes me as like it's pushed the boundaries for you a little bit.
Yeah. And I think, one of the interesting things is we always like to surround ourselves with people that think the same way. And I mean, you see it every day in politics, into, Taylor Swift fans, or whatever is the topic of the day. It's like people want to naturally congregate together with people that think in a similar way, for better or for worse, right? And I've actually, on top of all the things I do, I've also started several unsuccessful projects. And
really?
I've done it with like some of the most beautiful, incredible, talented people, but we kind of all were talented in the same way, or we thought very much in the same way. And certain things were so easy because it was just like, oh, we all, yeah, everyone's like, yes, I agree. And this time with Measured Guide, with my partners, whilst we all had lots of similar interests and, we get along very well, our talent base is so different, and the way that we problem solve is really different. And
yeah,
it's taken us 2 years to launch, which for me is a big struggle, because I'm like, we should have launched yesterday before we had the idea. But it's really pushed me to like take my time. It's pushed me to like really think about what is, how can you be a bit more timeless? How can you look at things to be evergreen? I think I'm a consumer of ideas. I like another idea. But like, how can you actually be more impactful with your ideas? How can you slow down? How could you say, we're going to pull it out? So I think it's been a really beautiful experience, because it's the challenge of, being able to push your ideas. And it's not that one's wrong or right. It's just that like, we need to think differently. And so I think it's been a really beautiful experience to be able to be around a team of like 3 amazing people, 3 talent sets, 3 ways of looking at a problem. And it may take longer to get there, but I think we probably get there in a better way.
Yeah, and you probably play like a better conceptual game as well, if that makes sense. It's like you're playing a longer game, a more infinite game, and I feel like that's better when you're trying to problem solve, because you want the best solution that works for the longest amount of time across problems. Like that's the solution you're going for.
You want the Allen wrench.
Yeah, you want the Allen. Yeah, you want that Allen key, man. And
Allen key.
Yeah, I know. I feel like that can be, you're so right. Like that can be so hard in teams where everyone kind of thinks the same way or has the same structure around thinking, because it kind of becomes this ideas singularity where like no good ideas can get escape velocity that are different and that see beyond the norm, I guess. But yeah, it's a tough one, like trying to be innovative. Like, how do you have like a system to be innovative? Is that because you're head of innovation at CAPI, which I just think is probably one of the craziest titles. Like, it's just such a cool title for a human being. But like,
yes, everyone always goes, "What do you do?" And I go, "Oh, like
I innovate, baby."
And they go, "Oh, okay, so like you're a bartender?" I'm like, I used to bartend, still on occasion. I will mix up a mean drink. I was like, "No, it's more like the concept." And they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that people did that."
Yeah, what is your, like, do you have a structure in place for when you quote innovate? Or do you like to go out to the woods and live deliberately? Are you kind of like a Henry David Thoreau-esque character? Like, what's your vibe? Like, actually, how do you go about doing that? Because that's such a strange thing to go, I suppose, view in abstraction or view in isolation.
So it's usually I think it's twofold. On one side, it's kind of problem solving. So we do get like, partners will say, "Hey, we're looking for a certain product that fits a certain need. Can you develop that?" And I mean, that's pretty straightforward. It's like, okay, I need to figure out this kind of problem or solution. And the second is more just like, I get a lot of time where I've just been told, just make whatever, like come up with it, whatever you want. Sometimes it comes to life. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it takes time to get there, and I mean, for me, anytime that I've ever innovated or come up with something, I close down everything. So it's like, even when I used to work at bars and used to make cocktail lists, I would kind of live deliberately. I wouldn't go out for drinks. I wouldn't open any cocktail books. I would actually stay at home and open cookbooks because I was like, if anyone knows anything about flavor, it's chefs and it's cooks. And I would just look at like, I mean, I'll never, I guess, like, just to give it an experience, like the first time I ever did Malibu, and I was told the brief was, "Oh, you need to come up with something, it's like a fancy cocktail list." And I was just like looking up coconut recipes, and I came to coconut shrimp. And so what I ended up making was I did olive oil, lemon juice, sea salt, black pepper, and Malibu. And it was so perfect, but it was like, it took me to like, I had to step out and I had to immerse myself in something around the area to get there. So I think on one side, it's about pulling away and trying to get inspired, and then, and trying to solve that solution. And then for the crazier stuff, I can't really explain it, but like, I just know it. I feel it. And I think like, a really interesting, and I think it's also, I'm a news hound. So every day I probably spend 4 or 5 hours a day listening to the news and history related podcast and reading the news. And like, it's like certain thing. For example, there's a lot of travel deals to Mexico. Everyone's going to Mexico. Everyone's been talking about Mexico City for the last 3 to 4 years, right? So like looking at that, you're just like, okay, well, tequila's going to come alive because people want that. So, 3 or 4 years ago, I was like, I want to make a margarita. I want it to be like super strange. And I guess like margarita soda today sounds like, yeah, duh. But 4 years ago, that was like tequila, it's gin and tonic. We need another tonic.
Exactly.
And it took about 2 years to be able to finally get the team around the idea that we should do a margarita soda. But that was just inspired by like, if I hear another freaking person tell me about their favorite spot in Mexico City, I'm going to lose it. But it was like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
So is it? Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. So you have this kind of sensory information that tells you what people are looking for or what people have experienced recently, and you put that into your work at CAPI, or you put it into the work that's in front of you.
Exactly. So on sometimes it's like, I guess I've got my general problem comes in, let's find a solution, let's work through how we get there. And then the other one is just a bit free form. It's like, oh man, I got this crazy idea for this thing, inspired by, I read an article that like, they're going to open up a direct flight from like Melbourne to Portugal. Well, if they're going to open a direct flight from Melbourne to Portugal, like let's start talking about port. Maybe it's a port-based something. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and it has this element of like there's an instinctual element to it too. Like you see that, and then you go like, oh, instinctually, people are going to want to recreate that experience, and they're going to want to recreate that at home when they get home. Like, let's provide them with that. Let's provide them with that solution.
Totally. And it's fun. It's hard sometimes to express that instinct thing because like instinct doesn't necessarily always make dollar or cents in terms of, you're just like, oh, I can't explain it. It's a feeling, like people are gonna want it. And I think, that's one of the most challenging things about innovation. It's not about coming up with ideas. It's about selling your idea in. And I think
for sure.
that's one of the, the kind of cool things is at CAPI, we have an amazing team that does marketing and we have an amazing sales team. And it's like, if it wasn't for them, I would just be some moony guy sitting out, in the park somewhere, just be like, oh, we should do this or that. Because an idea is only is like, then you become the guy where like, oh, Apple computers, 20 years before Apple computers started, I thought of the computer.
Yeah, like, okay. Sure. Yeah, you become the old guy at the pub who invented everything before it was ever an idea, which is super strange and like just not trustworthy. Is that the most frustrating part of innovation, selling the idea? Or do you like relish the idea of, trying to sit down with people and convince them that maybe this off the wall idea that you've come up with is worth pursuing? Or do you find that oddly taxing or tiring, like as that part of your job?
I was younger. It drove me crazy.
Yeah. Why? Why did it drive you crazy when you were younger?
I think the thing is, it's right. And it's also, I love to be, it's just, anyway, but it would just be like, but it's good. It's great. Why wouldn't you want to bring this to life? And like, and sometimes it's just not the right time. And it's like, I'll never forget this one buddy of mine. We were working on this project again listen, first you got to buy some apple wood.
Yeah.
But then maybe a little Malibu. So we thought of this idea where it was, you took a red stripe and you took a sip and then great idea. Everyone was like, no, this is dumb. 6 years later, it launched.
Really? There's a Malibu red stripe?
No, they made their own Malibu beer.
Oh, right. Okay.
But the thing was, it was like, the issue was that there was no insights. There was no consumer need for it at the time. So it's like, even though it was a great idea, it would have got out there. People would have said, and I think this is where I come to it today. At the time, I'm like, well, see, that just proves you guys were 6 years too slow. But really what that means is there wasn't the infrastructure to be able to roll something out like that. There wasn't the consumer insights or need. There wasn't an education program around it to be able to build it for the retailers, for the bartenders. So it's like, they could have brought it to life. And you know what? It would have died.
Yeah.
It wouldn't even have taken off.
Painful death. Yeah.
It would have just been like, what the fuck is this? So I think like, it's that, I think there's so much more to a good idea, and I think like it's even interesting at CAPI, we're about to hopefully launch a product in 6 months. And this will be the second time we've done this same product. My same idea as 3-4 years ago. But when we launched it 3 or 4 years ago, we didn't have enough time to get the idea to where it needed to be. It wasn't in the right packaging. It didn't have the right name. The product was amazing. The proposition is great, but we didn't have it right. And then after 3 years of having it, and it's ready for round 2. And so I think, and I think that there's that patience. And I think, back to like when I was younger and doing what I was doing, you don't have patience because you just want to do, I want to make ideas, I want to make my mark. I want to do this. I want to be accepted. Where now when you get older, you're like, okay, great idea, but like, there's more to it. There's a whole thing of execution that exists.
And do you think that your change in perspective is a result of getting older, or has it also like been coupled with, as we were talking about before, things like yoga practices or things like mindfulness? Do you think it's coupled with that, or do you think it's just like, no, that just kind of naturally happens as you spend time in the game?
I mean, I think that does have a really large part of it, but I even attribute, those types of things to getting older as well. I think slowing down, appreciating time and space. It's like, heck, if I was 24, and I mean, I think I did yoga for the first time when I was 25, and I hated it. I was like,
me too.
What the hell?
Yeah. No, I thought it was cruel and unusual torture. I do believe were my exact words at the time.
Oh yeah, and like everything smells like patchouli. I was like, in my head, I was like, I don't want dreadlocks. I don't want to rub myself with patchouli.
Yeah.
But again, that's me being young and thinking like, oh, I know everything, and I want to move,
It's the course of things.
Yeah, you slow down a bit. You're like, oh,
yeah.
You get a little spirituality in your life, and then you're like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. And it's this weird thing that's happened to me too. I've cared more like about sustainability as well as I've gotten older too. Like when I was younger, I was like, I think it's part of that mindfulness mindset. When you're young and you're like, I want everything to happen now, and you also like, something you just said resonated with me hardcore. I was like, I know everything. I've already figured it out. But then like later on, I've really been, as you would know, getting into sustainability and talking more about sustainability within innovation as well, and how to become more sustainable, which is a huge part of your role too, from everything that we've talked about. But how do you, like, is that something that's kind of been inbuilt in your work, or did you start out going like, oh, innovation needs to capture sustainability, or like how do you guys go about that in terms of pushing sustainability through innovation?
Actually, I mean, originally I never really thought about it because I was like, there's someone else that does that. There's some other guy, and his whole point of being is sustainability. So it's like, I just thought, oh, you don't have to really think about it because there's someone else. And I think like back to the, kind of what you were saying about your passion for sustainability growing, I think one of the things that kind of dawned on me is I have this amazing friend who I kind of look to as a mentor, and he talks a lot about it all starts with you. And if you do a better job, whether it's if you're just a little bit happier, or if you do your recycling, or if you do these little things yourself, that those will wave out to other people. So I think, again, back when I was younger, that wasn't my job. Someone else does it. I'll do my best to recycle, but the trash guy changes that. I don't know. But as I get older, I think it is something that you need to think about. And at CAPI, it's funny because we've been a brand for 12 years now. 12 years ago, sustainability wasn't a word that you would really use. And Pizzi, our founder, his whole thing was, isn't it crazy that we're shipping water from Italy over an ocean to Australia? That's like fudging crazy.
Nuts.
And then it's nuts. And there's all this plastic, which just sucks. That's like not a nice drinking experience. And, we're making all these products from like foreign materials when we have so much amazing produce and things happening in Australia. And so, he was being sustainable, before sustainability was there.
Was a thing, yeah.
I mean, it was there, obviously, like, but it was just this thing of like, we should be local and we should do things locally. And so I think from some degree, like CAPI's always been innovative with sustainability in mind from the beginning. And we just try to carry that through. I think like to some degree for us as a soft drink, our scale is a bit different. So, there's a lot of challenge that we have when it comes to sustainability, because at the end of the day, we're glass bottles. That's heavy versus plastic or aluminum. And some of the changes take a ton of investment. And at the end of the day, not trying to make excuses, but like we're a small family business. We don't have any investors. It's the Folk family is the owners. And when we have a crazy idea, to some degree, we're self-funded. So like we finally got into aluminum cans this year.
Really?
Which we're about to launch. Yeah, we're going to be launching a few products next month. And then we're looking to launch a few more products. We have 3 coming, and then maybe 3 more coming for the end. So it's like anywhere we can, we try our best, and we look for small things to do. Like, we just changed our label from a plastic label to a paper label. Looking at ways, is it possible to lighten our bottle? Which it's not very sexy innovation. It's not like,
no, unfortunately,
we're coming out
like this.
Sometimes you see a lot of brands do these crazy things, but it's something that's in our DNA, and it's something that we do, from the way that we run our office to the way that we try to source our ingredients to, the way that we try to work with our retailers and our partners to just be like, if we can do better, we should do better.
Yeah. Is that then your definition of sustainability? Like, I remember being asked by you guys at Measured what my definition of sustainability was. And I thought that was a really lovely open-ended question. So I'm now returning the favor. Like, I don't think I've ever asked you that either. Like, just between us, like what does sustainability mean to you? Like, what is your definition of that?
I'm going to tie it into yoga.
Okay.
But there's this really there's this really like kind of lovely story about like, people talk like, what is the point of meditation? And some people are like, oh, it's to sit there and to just be at one and conscious. Other people say that it's a working practice, that meditation is what allows you to be able to treat other people and to get through life. And so they talk about, there's the monk, he goes up to the mountaintop and he lives a silent life, no distractions, no anything. Then he comes down to the city and it's too loud, it's too crazy. He can't be spiritual in the city. And so you say, well, what is it better to like have this perfect balance of life and everything's okay? Or is it about being able to maintain that level of spirituality or balance in the chaos that is the world? And I think, at the end of the day, we live these wild, crazy lives. Like the universe that we live in is so different from, how the original landowners of where we are lived, like it was just it was so different. And so for me, sustainability is, it's about being conscious. It's about being mindful. It's like we have all these decisions, and it's like when you get to that decision, you just think, is it the bad one or is it the good one?
Yeah.
Or which is the less bad one? Like, do you need to have a car? You might have to have a car. You might have 2 or 3 kids and you work a couple jobs. You can't afford a Tesla. You can't afford to have an electric power outlet in your house because you don't have a garage. You live in an apartment building. So I think there's this, sustainability also is a bit of a luxury decision sometimes, unfortunately. Like, how crazy is it even though that we made sustainability luxury? There's people, my favorite thing is when you sit through some of these conferences and they try to tell a brand, why you should be sustainable? We've gone out and we've interviewed 10,000 customers. And do you know that 9 out of 10 customers say that they would pay more for sustainable products? And you're like, so we should be sustainable because 9 out of 10 customers will pay more for sustainable products? That's like, we've lost it. That's the wrong definition.
Yeah, it is. It's this completely counterintuitive way of reasoning why we should be sustainable in the first place, rather than like, because we won't have a system if we aren't sustainable.
And then it's like, and then it's like, I think it's this thing of like, we now live in a time where I can hop on a flight tomorrow on a good flight deal, 14 hours, I'm in LA. Did I need to go to LA? Did I need to have that experience?
Yeah, you
Probably not.
need to. Yeah.
I didn't need to. So I think there's also with this sustainability, there's like the needs versus the wants. And, I think like at the end of the day, we're human. We desire experience. We want to live the best life that we can. There's so much we can do. So I think it's also finding that balance of like being like, I might not be able to solve it. Sometimes I'm going to make the wrong choice. I'm going to make the wrong decision. But I think it's about just kind of having a want to do better and really just trying your best.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like a real key part of sustainability that I don't think we talk about enough is intentionality, or that sense of intention with sustainability?
Yeah, I think it's like, and it's like, I always find it a bit obnoxious when we say we need to be sustainable for the next generation.
Really? Why do you find that obnoxious?
Because we're one freaking species here.
Yeah.
Guys, like, here's the deal. This is maybe a bit controversial. Have you ever been to a party and you're maybe like the last person there, or you're hosting a party and this guy's hanging around and you're like, this fucking guy needs to go home. Yeah. Honey, turn on the heater. We're going to heat him out. We're going to warm this place up, get him out.
Have you ever,
like, at the end of the day,
at the end of the day, comparing the Earth's ecosystem to a host at a party that's like, we need to get this loud guy out.
Yeah, he's fucking it up, man. He's had too much to drink. Get him out, babe. Melt. He's like, do you have any more ice for my gin and tonic? Nope. Ice is melted.
Nope. Yep. So that's
because I think it's that thing though. Probably not. But I just think it's that thing of like, it's just so funny that like we're so selfish sometimes. Like we're like, we need to save the planet for us. No, we actually don't. If the planet cools, the freaking icebergs melt, we drown, freaking day after tomorrow, kind of weird zombie stuff happens, the Earth will recover, hopefully. And I think that's just even then, it's that funny thing of like, we sit and we go like, we need to protect the Earth for ourselves. It's like, no, we need to try to live at balance with the Earth. We need to live at balance with the other creatures. We aren't number one. The ecosystem, the community that we share in, that's number one. And so I think that's, whilst of course we want to think of our next generations, but it's like, it's bigger. Sustainability is bigger than that. It's bigger than that. It's like, we really need to think about, it's like even things like organic, it's like organic's all good and great, but if you have like a commercial organic farm that's like, you know what I mean? Like you could be using organic processes, but you could be like completely
dark shit to the ecosystem. It's just the nature of the game.
But
it's a weird one. I think. Yeah. But I also think it's about transparency as well. Like transparency is a huge part of sustainability that we don't talk enough about because, I just think sound bites and kind of the TikTok world needs, we're sustainable. This is why. There you go. And it's nice and digestible for people rather than examining the secondary and tertiary consequences of our actions for things like, we have, a massive organic farm that's the size of Colorado, and it's like, well, okay, but that I'm not sure that all of Colorado should be under organics, for example, right? So I do think that transparency is something that we just don't talk enough about, and that I'm not sure we have a shared understanding of what sustainable looks like, I guess, or how we've gone about collecting data, or how we've gone about constructing the concept of sustainability in your locality. I think that's a big thing.
Oh, I mean, it's so wild. I mean, it's funny. I was listening to this interview, and they had people from, what's the freaking thing in Switzerland? I want to say it's in Switzerland. It's like the large hydrogen.
Oh, the Large Hadron Collider. It's the Large Hadron Collider. Yeah.
Thank you.
CERN.
Yes. Whilst I may be head of innovation, my knowledge of science is
I am not a theoretical physicist. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was funny because they had this other scientist, not sure what he was a scientist of, but something. And he was explaining how like we're not using enough intellectual energy to solve sustainability. He's like, we're over here trying to freaking like get to Mars. We're trying to figure out like what is the nature of what's black matter or what's dark matter. Where he's like, who cares what dark matter is? He's like, we're just now talking about sustainability, and like 99% of our greatest minds are out there trying to figure out like how do we get a bigger telescope out there to find the birth of the universe. And I was like, oh shit, like that was just like an interesting thing on like sustainability of like we don't know all that much about it, I guess, like, which is kind of wild as well.
Yeah, to think that we're just scraping the surface of what sustainability actually means within our ecosystem. It's a bit sketch.
I mean, even just to put it into this like funny story. So at CAPI, for years we've said our product's 100% recyclable, and we work with suppliers and we get all the information. We've said is our label 100%? Yeah, everything's 100% recyclable. And then I was given the challenge was, like, hey, what improvements can we make to sustainability? So looking at different formats, looking at all these things, and come to find out, whilst our label's 100% recyclable and our bottle's 100% recyclable, in Australia, take that back. So the only way for our label to come off of our bottle to then be recycled is if it goes through a hot water bath system. Australia doesn't use a hot water bath system when they recycle. It just goes through a glass crusher. So I was like, wait, so does that mean that actually our product is 100% recyclable? Because from what we've been told is that everything is recyclable. And then there was this asterisk of, well, if it goes through this dry method, which is the only method in Australia, then actually any pieces of glass that stick to the label don't become recyclable. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? So then we pushed on and we said, well, how many clear labels are on glass bottles here? It's like, oh, so many. And I was like, do we have a number as to what percentage of our packaging then is not recyclable? And they go, oh, actually, no one's actually ever done a study on it. And they're like, we reckon it's negligible. We think it's only a couple percent points, but
no, it is
but we
not.
But we don't know. And I was like, well, that's crazy. And I was like, but there's so much going on. And I was like, so what's the solution here? And they're like, paper label. Like, if you put a paper label on and you run it through the process, any glass that sticks to the paper label, it's still 100% recyclable. But it's like, again, it's that transparency thing. And I put it on us a bit because we weren't asking the right questions. We were asking the questions that we thought were the right ones, which is it 100% recyclable? And then we didn't dig deep enough. Thank goodness, because sustainability is becoming more and more important. It did force us to look a bit deeper, and we did figure that out. But again, it's like, yeah, sometimes it's like you think you're doing sustainable. Turns out,
not as sustainable as you want it to be. That's for sure.
But I think the good thing though is we figured it out. We made a change. And the really beautiful thing is that everyone that I've talked to and told that story to, we haven't once been told shame on you. We've been told that's really amazing that you guys fixed course. And I think that that's like a really important thing as well. Like, obviously, like, listen, punish those MFers that are killing our planet intentionally.
Yeah.
But sometimes people do make mistakes. And it's like, if again, back to that intention, like if they try to fix it and they try to make change and they do solve it, like to some degree, not to say like, you have to applaud, but it's like, just be like, good work. You guys fix course, which is, I think, really nice.
Yeah, I think it's a constant journey like this. It's a journey towards, or we call it a journey towards permanence. because that for us is what sustainability should be at its best. We'll never get, we kind of approach it with the idea in mind that we'll never get to permanence. Like we'll never get to 100%, and that's okay. It's about the journey towards it. And the reason that we'll never get there is because we've done a bunch of shit in the past that is already affecting our future. So, we're already chasing our tail to a certain extent. And so we need to be comfortable with the idea of playing an infinite game in a certain way.
And I think what's so cool though, and I think what I get so inspired by what you guys do is that you guys have found a way through creating unique products to tell that story and to really push that narrative. Because it's like, at the end of the day, do you really need another spirit company, another wine company? Probably not. But if you're gonna, because again, it's like you guys could make bikes and say something, but what you guys have found is you found this really beautiful product that has a lot of story around it, and you're actually able to like fly a flag. You're able to start conversations. You're able to get people to really question it. And to be honest, I think anytime I think about sustainability, and hand across my heart, I literally think, what would Henry do?
Oh man,
WWHD.
Yeah.
Because, but it's true, because really what you guys are, and obviously I'm on your podcast. I wasn't paid to say this is not an advertisement, but it is. Yeah. It's just like, man, what you guys are doing in the space is just next level.
Thanks, man. It honestly, Laura, our CEO, Laura Carter, is the machine behind it. She's one of the most innovative people in the sustainability space. How she is able to do what she does in terms of making sure that we prescribe to our B Corp is just stunning. She's one of the best cat herders I've ever seen. Because to deal with us creatives, it's cat herding. That is for sure. It's nuts. But man, I really appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. Measured Guide, though, I want to briefly touch on Measured Guide before we kind of wrap up. You've obviously started Measured Guide, which is this really like when you were explaining it to me, it's this really interesting and I think really fun new way to think about beverage, and not just alcoholic beverages, so non-alc, alcoholic, and then also talking about kind of lifestyle as well. So if you were talking to someone who knew nothing about Measured, how would you describe it?
I think the best way to describe it is whether you're really into spirits or not, just like any other topic, there are amazing stories by amazing people with so much skill, passion, and love put into it that they're worth telling and they're worth reading about. And I think that was really at the core of what we wanted to do. We're like, how funny is it that there's a product that you have to be 18 to drink? It could cause serious problems to you if consumed improperly or, without responsibility. And no one's really doing an adult conversation around it. No one's really, like, how crazy is it? Like, it's all like freaking like sparklers or like blue drinks, Marinette Blue Curacao though.
Amazing.
Blue drinks forever.
100%.
Yeah. And I think it's just, like there's just such interesting conversations. And we think that whether you're super into spirits or cocktails, you could come to Measured Guide and get a pleasurable experience by reading about the industry, the products, and the people behind them.
100%. And you wrote recently on your kind of personal blog about martinis, and yes. Which I think was it was a really interesting way to view beverage in a really adult way, if that makes sense. Like it was kind of, I read it and I was actually like, this is really, it's quite beautiful and quite poignant in a certain way, because it touches on so many things. Like it touches on your favorite bars, but then your final line that you talk about is at our place. Like it's about welcoming people into your space and into your way of viewing the world. Why, first of all, it's mine. This is a two-parter for you, but it's like having more adult and nuanced conversations surrounding alcohol. What's the value that is given there for people? And B, why are those 5 martinis the best ones? And like, how is that linked to like having a more adult conversation about alcohol, and maybe a less kind of childish or one-dimensional conversation?
Well, I think like, I mean, there's different ways to consume alcohol, right? Which is like an interesting thing, but
and we all kind of know what they are, I guess.
Yeah, and there's a time and place, right? And for me, I think when I consume alcohol, it's typically in moments in which I want time to stop. I want time to stand still. And I think, that can be from you're out with your buddies having a beer at a footy game. It's a moment. It's like, you're with your friends. Not saying you need to have alcohol with those moments by any means, but there's something about it where it feels like time slows down. It's, maybe it's about that you have to be 18 to drink it. And so there's something around that, or it's like you're on a date with your partner at a beautiful restaurant and you're having these amazing experiences, or you're at a concert or you're at a jazz club. There's something about it where having like a really beautiful cocktail, like, not to say that it makes it feel dangerous, but it just feels so grown up. And I don't know if it's just from growing up in America and you watch these movies where it's like set in a certain time, or like, people are having Manhattans or old fashions, and it just feels like something. And I think that there's something about the connection that comes around it, like so many of the most beautiful moments that I've ever had have been around a cocktail, whether it's like being up till 2:30 at this really lovely bar in Berlin with 3 of my best buddies and just talking about like how inspired we are, or, being on a first date with somebody that turns out to be the most special person in your life. We talk around a drink, I think, is really interesting. And what really changed my mind about drinking, and it really gave me some kind of thought around it, is in the American Revolution, when these guys are out, talking about these crazy ideas, they were doing it at pubs because that's where they could meet without this thing. And they were basically having warm, uncarbonated ale and just being like, yo, you know what we need to do? We need to freaking no taxation without representation. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, when I have a beer, I'm just watching a baseball game. These guys are having a beer like, trying to set up democracy.
The foundations of our republic.
And they were like 23, hey, but I think there's just there's something really beautiful about like taking a moment and sitting and extending a moment or having a chat. And to me, that's where having a drink is. And for me, that's, I think, why martinis are so special. I think like, what is a good cocktail, right? Like, I always find that, who has the best cocktails, like on whose opinion.
Yeah.
But with my list of my top 5 places to have a martini, like they might not technically be the best, but in the moment that you're sitting there, there's no place you'd rather be, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I feel like cocktails at their best are the punctuation in your memories, if that makes sense. Like they're not quite the content, but they're the punctuation that kind of give it meaning or craft it. And so, I don't know, that's kind of how I like to think about it.
Yeah, it's like, there's the power of like, you're telling a story, and then you sit back and you pause, comma, martini sip.
That's what I'm talking about. It's chef kiss, man. It's chef kiss territory. It's so good. I love it.
Yeah. And I think that's like, for us, the one big thing for Measured is like, we never rate anything. We never give anything a 4 out of 5 stars, top 10. the way that we describe it is we pick things that we like, and we pick spots. Like when we give our city, like we're going to do a martini list to Sydney. We're not saying it's the best 5 martinis in Sydney. We're like, it's 5 places in Sydney where when you have a martini at this moment, time moves differently. Like from a skill level or like proper drink. But we're like, if you go and you have Friday lunch at 10 William Street and you order a martini at a wine bar, damn it, time moves differently. And that's a best martini.
Yeah. So do you feel like when, like you were talking before about like scores out of 10 or that kind of stuff, do you find like scoring like the flavor of things slightly derivative? Because I know you've been on tasting panels before at like, spirit shows and stuff like that. So do you think that like maybe Jeremy at Cantina are okay with like emotional tasting is the right way to taste spirits, or the proper way to taste spirits? Because we get a lot of questions about like, what's the proper way to taste this, or what's the proper way to taste wine, what's the proper way to taste spirit? And I get this sense from you that it's like, it's more about like, does it change your perception? And if it does, that's success.
Yeah, I would say if there's a guy to do it, the like scientific way, that's just not me.
Yeah.
Like I always find it funny where it's like, now it's not so much, but like I love all spirits. Rum is my favorite category. I can appreciate the skill level. But typically for the last 3 or 4 years, I would walk into the best cocktail bar in the world that makes the best cocktail list. And I'm like, I'll take a vodka martini dry with olives.
Yeah.
And it's like, what?
Yeah.
You don't want like again, I can appreciate the good drinks, all that stuff, but I'm like, it's just not my bag. But I think it's the emotional thing. And I'll never forget, I did this project many years ago, and there's a really amazing bartender, this guy named Gabe Orta from the Freehand group. And he was always like, ask anybody, just your regular customer, what's the best drink they've ever had? And they'll go, oh, best cocktail. It was about 3 or 4 years ago. I was on vacation in London, and I was out on a date with my wife, and we went to this place. The music was perfect. The lighting was right. Oh, they had the best steak tartare I've ever had. And I ordered a drink that had some gin in it. It was a gin cocktail. That was the best drink ever. And
there's nothing that's about like the specifications of what's in that drink or the measurements. It has everything to do with, set and setting and the experience of having that drink, which I just think is so much better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, in my humble opinion, there's also a technical way to do it right.
Sure, of course. But it's like saying, what's your favorite, I know you brought up, do you need a car? And this probably falls into the category of, no, I don't need a car, but I want one. It's like, what's your favorite, car to drive? It's like, you might not be a mechanic. You might not know how to put the engine together. But when you like step down on the accelerator pedal, it's your favorite car to drive. And there's a moment within it where you get to inhabit it. And it's cathartic. And I think drinks do that for people.
Totally. And there's like, I think there's also like a different, to use the car analogy, I've always thought Saab, Saab, the Swedish car.
Yeah, I know Saab. Yeah.
I thought that was the most boring, ugly car ever. Personal. And I met this guy that used to work for Saab, and he said, Saab is the coolest car of all time. And I said, bullshit. There's no way that you're going to tell me Saab is the coolest car ever. Lamborghini, Ferrari, I don't know, whatever.
Sure. Take your pick.
And he said, do you know why Saab is the coolest car ever? And he obviously explained it. And he said, Saab, they make aircraft for like Swedish government or army, military, whatever. And he's like, when they design their car, at night when you drive, they have a button called night mode. And it turns off all the interior lights of the car except for the speedometer and the fuel line, because that's all you need. Yeah, cool. And I was like, fuck me, Saab is the coolest car ever. So I think also like similar to drinking, it took one story about one little piece of driving that took me from being like, Saab is the most nerdy, boring car ever to like, how do I get a Saab?
Yeah. Awesome.
And I think it's the same with,
yeah.
You know, you hear about I use this one thing from this one farmer in my gin, and you're like, you have the best gin.
It's that one. Yeah, 100%. Dude, it's so true. Anyway, I'm gonna let you get to it because we've been chatting for quite some time now. But I am gonna do a shameless plug. I hope that's okay. If you want to check out Measured Guide, which I fully recommend that you do, you can hit them up on Instagram at measured.guide. It is going to be the ultimate guide to spirits, liqueurs, non-alcoholic drinks. It is wicked already. I've been following the Instagram like crazy. Is there anything else that we need to follow to like keep tabs on you?
No, the Instagram will have everything. Website coming soon by the end of this month. So keep an eye out.
Yeah, I'm
enjoy it.
Excited for it.
And while you're reading it, enjoy it with a beautiful Applewood gin and CAPI tonic.
And CAPI tonic. That's the shameless plug right there. 100%, man. Oh my goodness.